Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Is this the last majlis? I could take as long as I like. I really briefly would like to echo what our dear beloved brother Imran mentioned earlier regarding how grateful we are for having had this opportunistic moment to serve our Imam alayhi salam all together as a community. And briefly, unlike brother Imran, I will mention all the names of those who contributed only because I have a list right here. So that will be a few seconds. I feel guilty if I don't. So I would like to extend my wholehearted gratitude on behalf of me and dear brother Imran to the tech team. Mazahir, Muhsin, Hassanin, Ali Akbar, they are the guys that make us look good. So thanks to them. To the wonderful world star chef Mustafa Shivji. Wonderful, wonderful walking ring store, mashallah. May Allah bless him for all of those efforts that he put through in serving Ahlul-bayt, shining and radiating literally and figuratively. Of course, we can't forget our wonderful president, Brother Mahmoud, for his robust forbearance during these times, flying in and out of Iraq. Enough said, flying in and out of Iraq, that it's a difficult thing in its own. Brother Irfan Kareem, you know, the man, the myth, he introduces us, but who introduces you? So thank you for all of your help. Of course, Brother Abbas, thank you for your efforts. First row him, first row, locked and loaded, just staring. I admire that as a speaker. Speakers will tell you, Brother Imran can confirm, that when someone's looking at you as you are speaking, you just fall in love with that person. Someone is listening. And so the feelings are mutual, I hope, inshallah. Of course, Samir and Brother Musti or Mustafa, whichever you prefer, for their number one reaching out. SubhanAllah, I see this as a very interesting coincidence. It was about no less than 4 weeks ago, I was committed to recite somewhere else. But my availability changed. And I thought that this was perhaps destined because maybe Imam Hussein didn't want me to recite this year, as I have done for years, alhamdulillah. So suddenly, it was only a few days later, I got a message from Brother Samir saying, we would like to extend to you an invitation. So it seems like Aba Abdullah gave me that honor back, and it worked in our favor. As a result, however, I must be transparent. The lectures that were prepared for that other community, not going to mention where, were geared for them specifically. They had youth issues, and I was going to address their relative problems. So then I need to scramble to bring topics that can adjust and fit here. So I hope if I may have said anything, if something came out inappropriately, I understand maybe some questions, some of the content, or maybe a subject, particularly Zayd al-Shaheed night, maybe someone objected. Please forgive us. We're all doing our best. And inshallah ta'ala, we will continue to work hard. But I must say, speaking for an hour does take a lot of effort, especially when you have less than 2.5 weeks to prepare. So inshallah ta'ala, we hope Allah can accept all of our a'mal. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Sister Shazia for the youth efforts. We had a wonderful event for the teens, although I saw some of the adults tune in, but that was also nice to have, so may Allah bless her and all of them. Brother Shawqat and Shabir, where are you guys? So right here there's one, and there's the other right here. I said this to you the other day, he has a very romantic name, Shawqat, Ishtiyaq, I long for you, I miss you. And I think that literally will happen to me soon when I leave. I will miss the presence of this wonderful community, especially for their hard work and showing us around the site of, inshallah ta'ala, what will be our new home, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Of course, Brother Ali Sachu, I don't know if he's in the house, and he's outside, or he missed hearing his name. And for those who took us out and helped, showed us around town, gave us a bite to eat. I believe Brother Riyaz Manji also participated in that. Where are you? Maybe he's too humble to raise his hand. But for them, to all of you, on behalf of me, Brother Imran, thank you so much for this opportunity. Of course, for all of you, most importantly, for attending and giving us this platform. Brother Mikhail right here, others, the youth that would attend and invite us. Although you have to forgive me, I didn't go to your place when you invited. I was a bit mixed up here. Will you forgive me? It doesn't seem like you. Okay, good, inshallah. But most importantly, all thanks be to the Almighty. He brought us together to remember His chosen members on earth, the Hujjaj of Allah. And what an opportunity that is. But we also ask, Ya Allah, grant us the opportunity to perform their ziyarah as well. And inshallah ta'ala, Allah will bless us in that regard. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أفضل الذكر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى روحك وبدنك الطاهرة صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي كفيل الهواشم قمر بني هاشم أبا الفضل العباس السلام عليكم جميعا يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. أما بعد يقول سيد الشهداء Imam Abi Abdullah was narrated to have said أما سكينة فغالب عليها الاستغراق مع الله تعالى. As for Sayyida Sukayna, then she always emphasizes the worship and devotion to Allah. صدق أبا عبد الله صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. A third for the love of al-Baneen. A second rather. A third for the love of Sayyid al-Shuhada with your loudest of voices. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. There is an interesting narrative regarding the biography of the life of Lady Sukayna alayha salam. When we discuss her biography, it is very important to look into the multiple views of this personality, because that exists. There are multiple views. Many only stop with regards to her moments and her experiences in the event of Karbala. But unlike many of those who survived Karbala, she actually lived long afterwards. One can just look at, for example, the likes of Lady Zainab alayha salam. She left and she passed away a year after the events of Karbala. Others didn't last too long, from the wives of Imam al-Hussein, for example. However, barring Imam Zainul Abidin, Lady Sukayna alayha salam actually lived to about the 117th year after Hijrah. And we understand that from the traditions and books of narration, she was born approximately the 42nd year, making her on the day of Karbala approximately about 19 years old, which may not be the immediate impression many people have regarding Lady Sukayna. In fact, the impression traditionally is that this was a young girl, lost, afraid, not really knowing what's happening. But when examining her life in Karbala, after Karbala, and in the time she returns to Medina, you see that she is an individual who gives lectures and sermons. In the court of Ibn Ziyad, she actually begins to praise Allah by even using the number of the amount of sand on earth, how much I praise Allah. and the amount of drops in the ocean. She uses these eloquent phrases. We notice from Sukayna, the daughter of Hussein alayhi salam, wa alayha salam. However, many would stop at that moment and not consider that there is an entire research effort to examine Lady Sukayna, however, misrepresent her. Indeed, in the narrative that exists today, you find two, rather three. Two from the Shia narrative and one from the non-Shia. There are two really inappropriate narratives regarding Lady Sukayna. One of them inappropriate because the facts are not clear, they're just not right, which is this, that she was this young little girl in the events of Karbala, and she simply just didn't know what would happen, what was going on. And I believe this is because sometimes they're used interchangeably, her and Lady Ruqayyah. But when we examine the family structure and the nuclear family of Imam al-Hussein, you see that this one has a different mother. This one, Imam Hussein married her mother years prior. This one comes from that area, from this area. So it paints a different picture than what is traditionally understood as this young little girl running around, for example, unaware, bewildered, as opposed to someone like Fatima al-Kubra, another one of the daughters of Imam al-Hussein. And the confusion might even come from the fact that Imam al-Hussein named all his children the same exact name. Fatima Kubra, Sughra, Ukhra, Wusta. He might have also named all of his sons Ali, Zain al-Abidin, Ali al-Asghar, Ali al-Akbar. These are the most beautiful names, subhanAllah. But he names all of this, and now when we look and retrospect into history, we need to distinguish who's who. Because sometimes I run into the same situation where I see that there's a grave for someone called Zainab bint Ali, and there's another grave called Zainab bint Ali burial site. So now we have to run to the conclusion and say which one is what, because they're all given different names, or rather the same name, but now we look at different titles. So you might find, yes, a Fatima al-Kubra, but you might find another Fatima, also known as Sukayna, or the Alila Fatima stayed behind in Medina. But you might also have Imam Ali, Zainul Abidin, but then Ali al-Akbar, but then Ali al-Asghar, or Abdullah al-Radi'. These are necessary to distinguish, and actually most of them were given as titles upon their birth. This was the custom and tradition, and many have asked me so far here actually, that is his name this or is it that? There are no last names. In that lexicon and in the rhetoric of the 7th century Arabian Peninsula, you don't have a last name. You have a name and your father. But sometimes these can be very much multiplied. I see a lot of Abdullah, son of Muhammad. Who are we talking about? Oh, this one, An-Najjar, the one that plows the field, for example. Ad-Dabbagh, for example. So it was from the traditions to give a title. And as a result, this actually became mustahab today. Rasulullah would do it. And so it's actually recommended that when you have a newborn, yes, now it's easy because there are last names. But back then they really didn't have. It would just be you and then the name of your father. But to help distinguish who these people were, you would give them the title, Abu Abdullah. So when people think Abu Abdullah, it must be in reference to who? His son, Abdullah al-Asghar. Number one, that's Abdullah's kunya, because they're all Alis. They're all Ali. And an attempt to eradicate the dhikr of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Bani Umayyah persecuted anyone with the name Ali. So Imam al-Hussein fought that by naming all his sons Ali. Likewise, all his daughters, Fatima. But now you need to distinguish, so here comes the title. But when I look into the traditions that talk about, for example, a young Hussein rushing on the back of his father Rasulullah, his grandfather Rasulullah, I see that he says, Aya Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah, well, does he have a son by that time? Imam Hussein lost his grandfather when he was about 7 years of age. Abu Abdullah was the kunya, the title, Abul Hassan. Now one immediately almost assumes that that is in reference to Imam al-Hassan. Indeed it is also at times. But this was the kunya, the title, Al-Akbar, Al-Asghar. These are mustahab things. Sahib al-Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah. Aba Salih, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. We don't have any record that says he has a son called Salih, Abu Salih. Here we are. So these are mustahab to help for logistical reasons, to help distinguish, and by the sunnah of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Now many people today are like, why don't we revive this sunnah? Well, let's do it, why not? Give your children nicknames and titles, although some have given really bad titles here and there. You this, you that. But it's mustahab to give them that just by maintaining that tradition that the Holy Prophet laid out for convenience purposes, and this was a practice that would be emphasized. However, one narrative of Lady Sukayna is the fact that Lady Sukayna alayhi salam was this young girl. Historical records really conflict that. They really do. Part of the reason why they conflict is because of the same phenomenon. The names were all the same. So when I hear about a Fatima bint al-Hussein that was confused, then either that could be Sukayna, but could it be Ruqayya as well, that 4-year-old, which does apply with that type of behavior that we do see young 4-year-olds describing and saying, what's happening? I want my father. The circumstances are not too clear. Versus a lady like Lady Sukayna alayhi salam. But if you paid attention, we mentioned a third daughter, Fatima al-Kubra. Well, who's this Fatima? Because many people will cocoon the family of Imam Hussein from the daughter aspect to these two, rarely the three. Sayyida Sukayna, Sayyida Ruqayya, Fatima al-Sughra, who stayed behind in Medina. Shaykh al-Saduq makes mention of her existence, as well as Shaykh al-Mufid in his ikhtisas. That's why some people question, and that's the reason why I reference. But then you have a fourth daughter, Fatima al-Kubra. This fourth individual is actually rarely studied, and she has many stances as well, like her sister giving sermons. We will examine these all together, but this is one narrative that needs to be addressed. A second narrative is the fact that Sayyida Sukayna, many don't know this, and this is a tragedy. Sayyida Sukayna, in accordance to 3/4 of the Muslim world, was not a righteous figure. We have traditions, like in Abi Faraj al-Asfahani in his Al-Aghani makes mention that she would make. She lived very long, and so she would attend musical gatherings, that she would constantly marry and divorce. She had a bad style of hijab, called the hijab of Al-Jumma Sukayniya. They even named it after her. These are all allegations, by the way. We'll examine them one by one. Al-Jumma Sukayniya is what? Have you seen that pyramid hijab like that? Like a tower, Al-Buruj, and this is referenced in the Quran. وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةُ الْأُولَى. And do not display yourself like you would display back in the days of Jahiliyyah and ignorance. Tabarruj was the specific word from Burj, tower. Because there was a design, a style, that the hair would be towered like this, and it literally just grabs your attention. Haven't you seen some clowns sometimes? They have that weird hairdo like that. They would make mention that this was some of her attitude and behavior. وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And this is the 3/4 of the Muslim world interpretation of Sayyida Sukayna. That she narrates a lot of hadiths, poetic pieces that are just musical, that have nothing to do with Islam, and a character that would constantly divorce and marry. This, brothers and sisters, is a tragedy when we say, Ya Sukayna, Ya Mazluma. But we don't realize that behind the scenes, the majority of the Muslim world is not saying that. And I'm not here to antagonize. History is literally all we have to work with. Our area of history is not the majority opinion. But just because it's not the majority opinion doesn't mean you're wrong. And many people bring this up, by the way. Oh, if we're on the right path, why are we the minority? Sayyid al-Shuhada could have said the exact same thing. When he saw 30,000 raising swords against him, that must mean we're wrong. Who cares? You're a minority, but it's fine. Rasulullah made reference to you, after me, my ummah will be divided into 72. All of them are condemned, one of them is right. So with that being said, this whole number situation, the majority have a different opinion, the majority don't believe in this idea, reject this concept of Karbala, Fatimiyya, etc. If Allah really wanted to save the religion, He would make the religion the dominant one, correct? Well, the same could have been said for Ashura. The same could have been said for early Islam when Rasulullah saw it's only 4 people for the next 7 years in Medina. In Mecca, spent 13 years in Mecca. For the first 7, it was only a handful, like this, you can count them. Abu Dhar, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ja'far al-Tayyar, just this handful, that's it. Khalas, my efforts fall short. Everyone else is still bowing their backs down to idols, breaking their backs, bow down to that rock that they just built, and I'm trying to enlighten them and they just won't work. Years, I must be wrong. That is the wrong logic to have. So with that being said, let us look into the narratives that are laid and leveled against Sayyida Sukayna, how to address these allegations, so that today we are able to give a response, for goodness sake, not just to other people that have a different opinion, but to yourself. Can you answer these questions? Can you say and explain why I admire such figures? When accusations are leveled, how I can respond to such statements? Let's do that after a lot salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. it's important to begin the study of Lady Sukayna alayha salam by examining the nuclear family of Imam al-Hussein, that inner family. Aba Abdullah alayhi salam married 4 women in his time. Salawatullahi alayhi. And Imam al-Hussein, among the first of his wives, was arguably Sayyida Layla. Layla bint Abi Murrah bin Urwa bin Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. And we described Urwa bin Mas'ud the other nights, a very prominent Sahabi, so forth. And that she was also the niece of Muawiyah because her maternal family was Abi Sufyan, her mother was Maymuna, Muawiyah's sister. That's why clemency was offered to Ali al-Akbar, because he has a distant relation with Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Layla married Imam al-Hussein, and from Layla and Abu Abdullah, you had the beautiful, brave, the most to resemble Rasulullah, Ali al-Akbar. Sayyid al-Shuhada would then go on to marry during the expansionism and the colonization of the region around the Muslim world under the tenure of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He had went to the Persian region, modern-day Iran, conquered the lands of Kisra and all of this. As a result, you had many war captives. One of these war captives happened to be royalty. The daughters of a king by the name of Yazdajird II, which was a Persian king. He is a relative to Kisra, king of Persia, the man that Rasulullah dispatched a letter inviting him to Islam, and just ripped it in half like that. So his relative, his daughters, are being taken as captives under the Muslim rule. Now, just a brief disclaimer about expansionism and colonization in that Islamic era. I've had the honor to question and ask the office of Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani, what is our stance about this? When Islam spread by this, technically it spread by the sword. The reply came back, not by the Sayyid, I have to admit, but by his son, Sayyid Muhammad Rida, that anything that wasn't done, and this was a very wise answer, anything that wasn't done under the watchful eyes of the Ahlul-bayt, you can't hold Islam accountable for. There were attempts that were made to spread Islam. The Ma'soom wasn't in charge in conducting those events. Don't be surprised if some oppression happens here. You can't hold Islam responsible. I admit there were killings, unfortunate killings. I admit there was a lot of systemic racism. The Ajami paid double the tax than the Muslim had to pay from just the khums. The Ajami would have to pay the jizya 3 times, not even double, 3 times fold, even if they entered in Islam. Well, that's blatant racism. This is called Al-Wathiqa Al-Umariyya. And I remember the document of Umar ibn al-Khattab to what? The people of Palestine. Because it was under his time period, Palestine was conquered. I remember my father, Sayyid Basim al-Shara', he had a debate with a Chaldean Christian channel. It's a polemical channel that would always bring scholars and debate them. So he was invited. We encouraged him not to do it. These guys, you know, they're not here to actually discuss with you. They want to corner you. But he took them on. And the man brought a point he thought he could corner my father with, but doesn't realize that there's this whole difference, Shia Sunni. So he brought this issue. He's like, you know what Umar ibn al-Khattab did in the time where he conquered Palestine? From the pillaging, from the killing, the racism, even if they've entered in Islam, the response came back, the way you hate that, I hate that too. It wasn't the Ma'soom that did it. It was a man that I reject with respect to his legitimacy and his caliphate. I also complain about that conduct too. Any single colonization that wasn't done under the eyes of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, we refuse if there was a form of oppression that happened. This happened where Iran, modern day, so Persia back then, was conquered. There were women that were held captive. These women were being forced into homes of men that they refused. Now this also is another issue. What are you talking about? Say, this is Mulk al-Yamin of the Holy Quran, what the right hand possesses, war captives, etc., etc. You can't force anyone in Islam to do anything. So there's la ikraha fi din. I mean, if there's an ayah, some people have forgotten this sometimes, that yes, these people fall captive, and I know this is a sensitive topic, fall captive under the Muslim rule. They decide to embrace Islam, they're free. They don't, they need to be protected by Islam, and if they're given the option to marry into a family, then that's their right as well. But you can't compel them. You can't force them. La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in this religion. You are now forced to be my wife, for example, as a captive of war. There's no compulsion. You're forcing. There's no compulsion. Any salah that's done with a gun to your head, the salah is rejected. You're forcing me. Even if the act is accepted by Allah, I cannot be forced to do this. These are things people don't talk about when it comes to Islam being spread by the sword, expansionism, mulk al-yamin, what the right hand possesses, war captives, slavery. And this discussion can be very bad if you don't know what to say. Well, in that case, your religion, when those psychopaths conquered Iraq, north of Iraq in 2014, who remembers, they were taking Yazidi women as captives. Did they not? Many people were like, oh, they're just citing the Quran. They're just citing the Holy Quran. What does the Quran say? What does the Quran say? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلَّهْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ, that they are guarding of their private parts except upon their wives. We understand that one. But also what the right hand possesses. So let me open the books of tafsir. War captives. Is that accurate necessarily? La. You have to look at the context of what that means. War captives in the sense of now Islam expanded somewhere. If not under the eyes of a ma'soom, don't hold the Islam accountable. There wasn't a ma'soom doing it. We complained from day one, let the ma'soom rule. That's why you have these poor examples of Islamic expansionism. Islam went to that region. These women were held captive. Umar ibn al-Khattab decided to sell them, because you sell human beings unfortunately, sell them in the market of Medina. Imam Ali stepped in and he said, Ya ibn al-Khattab, Islam does not lower people from their life. These were princesses. They're about to be under the rule of Islam. Their life will be lowered. Islam doesn't lower. Islam raises people. Al-Islam ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh. Islam will only raise you. They're going to say, because of Islam, we now live the worst of lifestyle. So these are princes. These are princesses. You have to give them that exception. It's like, fine. Instead of we choosing who they will be married to or would live under, let them choose. Look at the Ahlul-bayt. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ فَكُّ رَقَبَةِ. And what is the great of all of these acts, the great of all of these decisions? The freeing of the captive. Look at the emancipation process of Islam. Zero conduct with respect to how you hold slaves. 100% with how you free slave. Not if you conquer, this is how many you will have. If you find these many women, this is what you can do. It's not that. It's if you find slaves, this is what you do to free them. The emancipation process of Islam far outweighs any form of emancipation. In a world where the whole world was holding people as slaves and captives and objects, Islam was like, the greatest thing you can do, fakku raqaba, free that neck. Subhanallah. I wish more people would study this. I wish more people would write master's theses on this. I wish they would write doctors, PhDs, dissertations on this. How many people do? What we see is about linguistics in Islam, the poetic understanding of mysticism and Islam. That's very nice. What service is going to do to the Islam that's being battered today, and the accusations that are leveled against Rasulullah, left, right, and center? Do I even need to begin explaining what these accusations are? Someone come do a piece on this, inshallah ta'ala. Some people are like, oh, speak for yourself. Are you doing anything? Inshallah, we're working our best. We're trying to do. I just got accepted to my master's program in religious studies. Give me some time, inshallah ta'ala. But this is a collective effort, brothers and sisters. You don't have to go academia specifically. Write a piece. Attend these majalis. Inshallah, there is some, maybe just an ounce of benefit that then you can take to that coworker, to that non-Muslim, and be like, hey, maybe what you heard was wrong, if the discussion ever comes up. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, don't let them fall under that conduct. He says, we'll let them choose who they want to marry. These two women, they were sisters. One of them said, I choose, there's a man here, if he would be willing to, I would be under him. He goes by the name of Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. His conduct and akhlaq is like none. I haven't seen anyone like that. And he, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, was a Shi'i of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he was raised by him. So that's why, no surprise. The other one said, there's a man next to the man that had just freed us in this way. He has the light that I've seen only with godly people, and his mannerism in this entire process is also bar none. Who is he? If he would be interested, I will go his direction. They said, that's Hussein, son of this man, Ali ibn Abi Talib. This lady goes by the name of Shahr Zanan. Shahr Zanan, she was told that I would wish to adjust my name because my name, Shahr Banu, has in the Farsi meaning the lady of her time. And she said, but I heard that there is a lady of our time, Sayyidatu Nisa al-Alameen. I want to adjust it, call me Shahr Banu, which is the lady of her area only. And so she made that adjustment. She married Imam al-Hussein. From this marriage, Imam Zainul Abidin was born. Imam Zainul Abidin was born. His mother died in childbirth. She didn't get to see him, nor did Imam Zainul Abidin get to see her. Do many people even bring this up in the context of the study of the Ahlul-bayt? That Imam Zainul Abidin grew up an orphan. His mom died in childbirth. And of course, we understand that a lady who dies in that process dies a shaheeda in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who raised Imam Zainul Abidin from the women of Imam al-Hussein? Layla. Layla, the mother of Al-Akbar. That's why Al-Akbar and Imam Zainul Abidin have this beautiful relationship, subhanAllah, like they all do with their family. Sayyidu Shuhada then got married to a third lady in his time. And this one was under his father's rule. A man by the name of Imra'ul Qais al-Kindi. Imra'ul Qais al-Kindi was Christian. Christian man. He was a phenomenal poet. Something very interesting I have to mention. I remember when taking Arabic poetry as a class, we actually have that as a class in Michigan, no surprise, in university, Arabic poetry at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, there was a portion where we studied Arab poets. We actually studied Imra'ul Qais's poetry. He was a Christian man. He has poetry that is actually quite impressive. He was a phenomenal poet. Imra'ul Qais al-Kindi goes to the city of Medina and he wants to learn more about Islam. They tell him, what do you want to know about Islam? He's like, I want to go to the source of the knowledge of Islam. They said, well, you missed out on the Prophet, but the next best thing is his son-in-law Ali ibn Abi Talib. Go to him. He goes to Imam Amirul Mu'minin. By the way, this is just a pointer, an observation. The whole society admits the greatest scholar after Rasulullah was Amirul Mu'minin. Go to him if you want to learn more about Islam. He goes to Imam Amirul Mu'minin and he becomes tenured, tutored. He's under the shadow. Imam Ali mentors him. He falls in love with Imam Ali. He embraces Islam. He says, Ya Abul Hassan, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to go back to where I come from. I'm a Muslim now. In fact, I want to have the honor to marry into your family. I want my daughter to marry into your family. My daughter, she's an impressive woman. In the days of Jahiliyyah, she wouldn't drink. She wouldn't marry-make. She would be modest. She was an observing Christian lady. She had hijab. She was modest. She was upright, pious, God-fearing. And now she also entered Islam with me. I want her to marry into your family. And she also has that beauty that any man would be interested in. Couldn't you tell me if there's someone in your family that she could marry and give me that honor just to be your brother-in-law? And what an honor that is. Sukayna. Now here's something I have to. Imam Hussein's relationship with Lady Rabab, all his wives. But history records us this following. The women might be very happy for this. He loved her so much, he would write her love poetry. Aba Abdullah. Listen to the following. The Mu'arrikhun have made mention. And see, have you written that Mrs. Love poetry yet? He would say, لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّنِي لِأُحِبُّ دَارًا تَحِلُّ بِهَا سُكَيْنَةُ وَالرَّبَابُ أُحِبُّهُمَا وَأَبْذِلُ جُلَّ مَالِي وَلَيْسَ بِلَائِمِ فِيهَا عِتَابُ. Imam Hussein says that how I love a house that has inside it both Sukayna and Rabab. I love them so much, and I spend all my money to them. And to the one that says, why do you overspend and overlove? Don't worry, you don't know what I have. Aba Abdullah shows us that the keys to a successful marriage is to be that heartful, warm, tender individual, if even in the circumstances where it's necessary, writing those poems to your missus or even to your daughter. He says, how I love these two so much. I love them so much. He emphasizes it. I spend all my money on them. And to the one who complains, why are you doing that too much? Don't worry, you don't know what I have. That's a message for you. Go ahead, start writing your love poems. What's wrong with you? If not to the missus, start with the daughter. You know, well, I'm not going to hold you back. Aba Abdullah shows us beautifully that these are what is going on here? Yeah, in the process? Inshallah, ahsant, mashallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It shows you how much Aba Abdullah loved his family, salamullahi alayh. Then Sayyidu Shuhada, approximately lastly, he marries another lady. This would be his last. She goes by the name of Ishaq bint Talha bin Ubaidillah at-Taymi. Some of us might know about Zubair and Talha from the event of Jamal. Talha had a daughter, upright, God-fearing lady, subhanallah, Ishaq. Now get this, you think that those who marry into the household of the prophetic family are lucky? Watch this, watch this. Ishaq first marries Imam al-Hassan. She gives him a number of children. Then Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam dies in the 50th year after Hijrah. He's martyred. On his deathbed he wills, Ya Aba Abdullah, I don't want my wife to leave this household. If she's fine, then keep her married into the house of Bani Hashim. She's an upright lady. And I don't know, there are wild beasts out there. Let her stay within our household if she would be okay with it. When Imam Hassan left, Imam Hussein married her. Now she married two Sayyidai Shabab Ahl Jannah, both of them. From Imam al-Hussein, she gave him the following. Fatima al-Kubra. We will look into who this is soon. She gave him, many historians make mention, Ruqayya. She also gave him Fatima al-Alila, aka al-Sughra in Medina, who was ill and unable to come. So we hear about all these three, Ruqayya, Fatima al-Sughra, at times Fatima al-Kubra, but who even knows the mom? Who even knows the mother? She goes by the name of Ishaq. Her name was actually hard to find because most people sometimes, if their nickname is known so well, you begin to figure what their name is. Right now, like Abu Talib, for example. Abu Talib bin Abd al-Muttalib. What's his first name? But if you do some digging, you'll run into, for example, Abd Munaf, maybe even Imran here and there. Ishaq by the name of Habwa. Habwa bin Talha, Sayyid al-Shuhada's wife. She gave him these children, Fatima al-Sughra, Fatima Ruqayya, and Fatima al-Kubra. As-Sayyida Sukayna comes from that family with Rabab, her mother. Sayyida Sukayna has that brother, Abdullah al-Asghar as well. So this is the nuclear family of Imam al-Hussein. On the day of Karbala, she would be, if we're looking at the birthdays, 42 after Hijrah, 61 after Hijrah Karbala, she would be about 19 years old. Now, Imam Hussein has a statement regarding her. He says, وَأَمَّا سُكَيْنَ فَغَالِبٌ عَلَيْهَا الْإِسْتِغْرَاقُ مَعَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. As for Sukayna, she always stresses and emphasizes worshipping Allah. There is, we call it the veil, the tail of the hadith. This portion is questionable, where he says, فَلَا تَصْلُحْ لِرَجُلٍ. As a result, she is not befitting to marry anyone. She's not concerned herself with the world of marriage. She only wants to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This has led some, if this last portion of the hadith is accurate, has led some to assume she never got married in her life. That she never got married. And if we look at history, later on in her life, we don't see a marriage happening. In the narrative of the non-Shia, she gets married and divorced, married and divorced. We'll look into that later. But this last portion of the hadith, فَلَا تَصْلُحْ لِرَجُلٍ, and so as a result, no man can really marry her. Some might connect this to the case of Fatima al-Ma'suma, the daughter of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. Well, where she didn't get married? Some will look at it this way and say, well, it's because they were too focused on ibadah. This logic actually is not quite accurate. Number one, that tail portion of the hadith, and if we take it seriously, it contradicts and conflicts what Rasulullah preached. Zawaj is half the religion. There's no asceticism, celibacy in this religion. There is in Christianity, and not even in our narrative of Islamic Christianity. For example, that in order to be obedient to Allah, never get married. Why? Why not? Al-malu wal-banun zinatul hayat ad-dunya. Wealth and a big family is from the adornments of life. Zina is what makes something beautiful. Take your zina عند kulli masjid. Inna Allah jameel yuhibbul jamal. These are adornments, these are beautiful, these are appreciated things in life. And so to say that she wants to only worship Allah, so as a result she won't get married, technically she didn't fulfill half her religion. That's not really necessarily worshiping Allah deliberately. We're not saying if someone is trying and unsuccessful, that half the religion will always be neglected. La, I mean there's an effort that at least is being put there. And at the end of the day, it's not necessarily wajib like it is with salah, but it's a highly encouraged thing to do in one's life at one point. So to say she wants to avoid getting married to anyone because she wants to devote her life to Allah, theologically there is a conflict. Now, there might be the argument where there's no one befitting for her. no one appropriate for her, which might be the case for Sayyidah Fatima al-Ma'suma buried in Qom. If you look at that time, the rise of Banu al-Abbas, the fall of Banu Umayyah, there is no, like literally, I can't find a single guy who still worships Allah properly. From the sab they're doing, the la'na they're doing to Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khalifa drinks, the this and that. The Khalifa, his name is Saffah, swimming pools of alcohol. Really, the circumstances were not qualified and optimal to find someone necessarily appropriate or befitting. Perhaps that's an argument for Lady Fatima Ma'suma. But to say that's the reason why that Sayyidah Sukayna probably didn't get married is a conflicting report. We do have one report that she did get married. And she was married on the day of Ashura to the son of Imam al-Hassan by the name of Abdullah al-Akbar. Ya al-Asghar, Ya al-Akbar. Abdullah al-Akbar fought in Karbala and died. Abdullah al-Asghar didn't fight but was killed, if you recall in the Maqatil. Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam, he is there, and in those final moments he rushes in and he wants to protect his uncle. So Sayyidah Sukayna alayhi salam lives her life after the events of Karbala. She gives her sermons in Kufa, indicative of her faith and iman to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She then as well in Sham, she also has these moments where she's speaking and you're like perplexed from the sermons she's delivering. Notice these are the women of Bani Hashim. They do not hold back from speaking their minds and thought. And whenever they speak, they're literally articulating eloquent and beautiful speeches, subhanAllah. When she gets back to Medina al-Munawwara, she does something interesting. She actually tells Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, the famous companion of the Holy Prophet. She says to him, Ya Jabir, my uncle, or rather, my older brother, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, is about to kill himself from how much he is crying. And because you have a special place in our hearts, Ahlul-bayt, you're a Sahabi, one of the very few living, you saw Rasulullah, Imam Zayn al-Abidin will listen to you. Go and tell him enough crying. Sayyidah Sukayna does this. She says, go and tell him enough, you're about to kill yourself. Jabir bin Abdullah goes to Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he sits with him, and he says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, for how long do you want to cry? He then says the beautiful line, Ya Jabir, I saw 17 of my family in front of me, martyred. While Yaqub knew Yusuf was alive, he's a Nabi. What do you think he doesn't know, he's just ignorant? Knew Yusuf was alive, separated from him, yet he cried so much, فَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَهُ. His eyes went white from how much he cried. And you're saying, I can't cry when I saw 17 right in front of my eyes, Ya Jabir. But this shows you Lady Sukayna's emphasis and care to her family. Some might raise the alarming point, how could she tell the Imam not to whatever? I mean, if your family member is suffering immensely, he's the ma'soom, of course. And so your level of knowledge with him is way different. You naturally have that soft heart for your family member. And look at what she does. She tells Jabir, go talk to him. Help him out a little bit. He's suffering. He's being hurt by his own grief and tears. Salamullahi alayh. We also find one evidence that seems to suggest she was independent at the time in Medina, such that Imam Zayn al-Abidin would take care of her himself, meaning that she didn't necessarily find another husband to marry, as it is made in the other views of the non-Shia, that Imam Zayn al-Abidin sold a well. He had a well outside of Medina. This well, Imam Ali dug it. Many describe what was Imam Ali doing in those 24-year period. The first Khalifa ruled for 2 years. Umar ibn al-Khattab ruled for how long? 10 years. Uthman bin Affan rules for how long? 12 years, 24 years. What was Ali doing, alayhi salam, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen? Many of his efforts were concentrated on preserving the Quran in its complete order, and then participating in society to the degree he can, at the same time solving the problems of society, such that the Khulafa would constantly say, had it not been for Ali, لولا Ali لهلك فلان فلان فلان, and planting trees and digging wells in the area known as Yambu'. Yambu' now is filled with thousands of palm trees. Amir al-Mu'mineen spent that time planting it. If you ever read a story about the latter Imams gifting this man 10,000 dinar, that man 1,000 whatever, it's like, did they just make the money out of the sky like that? Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen planted an investment for them. Long-term thinking, subhanAllah, wells and trees, such that Imam Zayn al-Abidin benefited from the product of this. Later on, he knew this would need to be used for my family because they're going to be persecuted. We're going to have our rights usurped. Let me help them from now. SubhanAllah, look at that long-term thinking. Abul Hassan salawatullahi alayh. In that case, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imam Zayn al-Abidin owned a body of water, a well outside of Medina. He sold it to a man under the condition that he would take the water from this well from time to time and water the palm trees that were owned by Sayyida Sukayna. She inherited palm trees from her father. Imam Hussein inherited them. Of course, the martyr, and let's talk about the inheritance. She got some of those properties, the commodity, the palm trees. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, look, I need you, if you want to buy this big body of well, which is a resource for us, and especially in the desert, it's a resource, you have to water the palm trees that belong to her, meaning take care of her. She's my younger sister. If she was married, this would be an attempt a husband of hers would make, for example. But that is where this report comes and shows us that Imam Zayn al-Abidin stressed on taking care of his family after that moment. She lives her life, salamullahi alayha, again, in the major opinion, unmarried. Unmarried. If the marriage happened, it was likely probably from Abdullah al-Akbar of Imam al-Hassan. That's where we have the evidence that is clear. From that point, these are all speculation. Then she lives her life until the 117th year after Hijrah. Karbala was 61. She outlives Imam Zayn al-Abidin because he was martyred in the 94th year after Hijrah. She's about 75 years old. Now, there are allegations that are leveled, ya Shia. Lady Sukayna alayhi salam, if you read Abi Faraj al-Asfahani's Al-Aghani, famous work. Al-Aghani, just from the name, the music. Ghina, Al-Aghani. He mentions and documents poems from Arabian Islamic history. This poem said this, the Sha'ar said that, poetry. In fact, even in Al-Aghani, you find this poem we recited earlier, how Imam Hussein loves his family, how I spend my money on my family, my wife and my daughter. Don't blame me for loving them so much. You don't know what I have. We find that. He documents all of these poetic efforts. He also documents musicians. These musicians here, in that chapter of the musicians, you find a lot of references to Sayyida Sukayna. That Sukayna, alayhi salam, this is an allegation, would constantly merry-make, where there would be dancing and music. She would participate. And that she would have a jumma of a hijab, the one that looks like a tower like this. Sometimes, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's very eye-opening. You could easily see it and spot it, which is not proper hijab at the end of the day. It's something that attracts that attention negatively. And that she would constantly marry and divorce. Marry and divorce. This is mentioned, and Abi Faraj al-Asfahani's work comes in the year he died, the year 365. So we're not talking about like in the last 300 years. La, we're talking about 200 or so years, over 200 and a half years after Karbala. Here's an early scholar who makes this reference. How do we reply to that? Here's an issue. Look at every one of those ahadith. Absolutely every single one. They are narrated by one man. Az-Zubair bin Bakar. Az-Zubair ibn al-Bakar or bin Bakar, from the lineage of Abdullah ibn al-Zubair. Abdullah ibn al-Zubair would wake up cursing Imam Ali, go to sleep cursing Imam Ali, and his whole life was condemning Ahlul-bayt. Az-Zubair ibn al-Bakar is his great-grandson. He remains the same way in his practice and vision, despises Ahlul-bayt. Now here's another issue. This narrator I don't accept. He hates Ahlul-bayt. Why is he narrating things and I'm going to expect to take them like him from his mouth? No, absolutely not. He also does this. When they say Sukayna would do this, here's an issue many people haven't realized. They never say which Sukayna. They say Sukayna would do this. Sukayna would participate. Sukayna had this hijab, etc., etc., etc. Not Sukayna bint al-Hussein. Now when we read the works of Ilm al-Rijal and the biographies of narrators of ahadith, we see a Sukayna, two of them. One of them is quite questionable. This one goes by the name of Sukayna Zubayriyah, from that same family. Abdullah ibn Zubair, Az-Zubair ibn al-Bakar, his cousin. She would constantly marry and divorce. She would constantly dance and merry-make and sing and write poetry about nonsensical dunyawi things. She had that bad hijab. So she, as Sukayna Zubayriyah, they purposely didn't say which Sukayna. Today, 3/4 of the Muslim world says, yeah, Sukayna bint al-Hussein, merry-making. Sukayna bint al-Hussein, oh, she would love to marry and divorce, Hasha lillah. And all of this you can nullify with one word. What Imam Hussein said about his daughter. أما سكينة فغالب عند الله الاستغراق مع الله تعالى فغالب عليها الاستغراق مع الله تعالى. And as for my daughter and beloved Sukayna, she is constantly worshipping Allah. The addition of the hadith فَلَا تَصْلِحْ لِرَجُلٍ is rejected and refuted because of its theological conflicting reports. In addition, it is an addition that is not found in the majority of the narrations. One of them has it. So the consensus even is not in that favor, that she is not befitting to get married to anyone. Allahu A'lam. She didn't get married, she didn't get married. I mean, after the event of Karbala, do you even think about marriage anymore? And you survived it. After what happened, we heard that in Mukhtar. Until he avenged Imam al-Hussein, no Hashimiyya would get married. Not just that, no Hashimiyya would brush her hair. No Hashimiyya would take off the black. And they question you, why do you wear black? Habibi, if it doesn't concern you, wear the colors of all the rainbow. My master today is mourning. And my Imam today is mourning. It may be the 12th or 13th of Muharram, the 11th of Muharram. It may be past. But every single day is Ashura to us. Every land is Karbala. Not a hadith, but a beautiful slogan and principle to live by. Wherever you go, you remember the principles of that man. He made you who you are and gave you your identity. You would not have the example of resistance like you have with Aba Abdullah had it not been for Aba Abdullah. He is the one who said very clearly, my Shia, don't worry about them. You think you want to erase my memory? Don't worry. Whenever they drink water, they'll remember me. Water. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيًّا. And we created from water all life, all living things. Aba Abdullah, she, Salamullahi ala Zainab, said, you will never erase his remembrance in the hearts of the believers. Today, the fact that he is remembered 1,400 years later is a testament to her words. Subhanallah, how you said that, Ya Zainab. And today, the fruit is showing. Today, we gather. There is no continent except that it has the mentioning of Imam al-Hussein.
Hussainiyat! Hussainiyat! Ahlul-bayt lanat!
Ahlul-bayt, wherever they are, you will find the believers. And I have no doubt that today, the Ahlul-bayt are with us, brothers and sisters. We never thought the Ahlul-bayt left, brothers and sisters. When they died in the way of Allah, Allah said that these people are not dead. مَنْ مَاتْ عَلَى حُبِّ آلِ مُحَمَّدٍ مَاتْ شَهِيدًا. Simply, whoever dies with the love of Ahlul-bayt dies a shaheed. Then what about the shaheed from Al-Muhammad? وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءً. Living. Not just alive. أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Receiving rizq from Allah. How can a person receive rizq from Allah after they have died? Well, I agree with you. You cannot receive rizq if you're dead. You can only receive rizq if you're alive. Hence why my Ahlul-bayt are alive. My Aba Abdullah is alive. My Zainab is alive. And if they are alive, the best of majalis is their majlis. So I ask you, Ya Bibi, if you are here, please intercede for us on that day. We have spent our time mourning your son, Ya Zahra. And we gathered and we ask you to accept from us the little that we have done today. The little throughout these nights. May I not go back to my home and completely neglect everything I was told, everything I heard, and go back to myself, that old self, that when it comes to Ashura, he's here. She's here. But when Ashura is over, I go back to myself. You stay here with Ashura. Because Ashura never leaves. Ashura lives on. It's a flame in the heart. And it's not me who said that. Your Prophet said it. في قلوب المؤمنين حرارة لأبي عبد الله لا تبرد أبدا. in the hearts of the believers is a flame for Imam al-Hussein. And it never cools. It will never cool. And it never goes away. Some people have that spark, but it's a spark and it dies. The second Ashura is over. Others take the Ashura momentum with them throughout their entire life. Who are you today? What will you do? Because on a day like today, that heart and that heat should be engulfed, brothers and sisters. Should be engulfed for the family of Imam al-Hussein. Should be engulfed for the daughters of Imam al-Hussein. On a day like today, they are now making their way to Kufa, brothers and sisters. And when they got to the city of Kufa, about 3 days later, Imam Zainul Abidin returned back to Karbala. And how did he do so when he is a captive? I'm not surprised when I saw the same Lord that allowed the Queen of Sheba to come from Yemen all the way to Palestine to Nabi Sulaiman through Asif bin Barkhiyah, his successor, who many maintain is not a prophet, just his successor. Then what about the family? And how did he do it, by the way? He did it because the Quran said he had some ilmun min al-kitab, knowledge from the book. What about the family who the whole book was revealed for? They can't go back to tend to their loved ones. Aba Abdullah remains on the ground for 3 days. Imam Zainul Abidin returns to Karbala through the karama that Allah has given him. As he is on his way, the tribe of Banu Asad is present. And they really are ashamed. They saw that Imam Hussein was martyred and slaughtered along with his family and companions. Their woman said, you know, you guys didn't participate and help the man. He's the son of your prophet. At least when he is laying on the field, bury him. Tend to his wounds. Go and dig graves. The women were ashamed from their husbands. You should have done something. At least now bury the bodies. As they began to scramble and bury the bodies, they had a hard time doing it. They couldn't tell whose limb belonged to who. I remember Ayatollah Sayyid Muhsin Hakim in the 1960s says, I was given the honor to go to the Haram of Abu al-Fadl. And I'm told in the Maqatil, Abu al-Fadl was so tall. And he had those broad shoulders and that height, the son of Ali. When we got to the grave of Abu al-Fadl, I saw that it was a small tomb. And they asked me, Ya Sayyid, why is Abu al-Fadl in such a small tomb? Wasn't he this man who was tall and a warrior? He said, I wonder how many times did they slash at him and cut him, such that they collected pieces of his body to bury. Banu Asad say, we saw from the distance a man coming. But as he got closer, we can hear him say some lines. And he begins to say these, Abba ya Hussein, Abba ya Hussein, Amma layali famusahad, وأما حزني فسرمد حتى يختار الله لي دارك التي أنت بها مقيم. Father, O Hussein, Father Hussein, as for my nights, they are sleepless from now on, and as for my grief, it will be everlasting until I meet you with Allah. I meet you on that day at your home in Jannah, of which we will meet and stay forever. حتى يختار الله لي دارك التي أنت بها مقيم. They saw that this man got closer and they didn't know who he was. They began to move away thinking it was one of the men of Ibn Ziyad. As soon as Imam Zain al-Abidin got closer, he said to them, do not worry, for I am here to help you bury these bodies. He then told a group of the men, go and grab a large cloth, let me help you and let's help each other. They got that long and large sheet. They said, what do you want to do with it? He said, let's just collect the limbs inside it. They went and collected whatever they could from the shuhada. Imam Zainul Abidin said, dig the large grave right here and bury all of these warriors of Allah. But as for Habib bin Mudahir, I want him buried by himself. For how he stood for Abi Abdullah when no one was there, may he get his own qabr, insha'Allah. And today we see that Imam Zainul Abidin was manifest, and he manifested that claim. You go to Karbala, Habib has his own dharih. He then said, take the body that is in front of me. They said, who is this? We cannot tell who this one is. He said, this is my older brother Ali. Take him and bury him adjacent to the shuhada. And now I need to bury the body that lies alone by the river. Imam Zainul Abidin began to walk. They say that he looked down to the floor. He picked something up and he began to kiss it. They said, what was that? They came closer and saw it was the right arm of Abul. As he kept going, they saw him stop and pick up something else and kiss it as well and place it to his forehead. They saw and they got closer. This was the left hand of Abul Fadl. Imam Zainul Abidin told them, come and help me with my uncle Abbas. Then they buried Abul Fadl where he is now in Karbala. Subhanallah, the same distance between Safa and Marwa in Mecca. Hussein here and Abbas there. Then he said, now only me and unseen forces, the malaika from Allah, can bury this body. Only I and the malaika can do it by ourselves. No one else can bury this. He then walked and he looked at the body of Sayyidu Shuhada, the lifeless, helpless body and the headless body of Aba Abdullah. He told them, dig the grave by the head of Aliul Akbar. And Imam Zainul Abidin collected what he could from the body of Hussein. Many of us have our fathers left and move on. But how many of you had to bury your father's body piece by piece? As he buried Aba Abdullah, he picked up something from the floor, he kissed it and raised it to his forehead. It was the finger of Hussein they severed after he was martyred. They buried Imam al-Hussein together. That's why if you go, Aliul Akbar is buried by the feet of Aba Abdullah. Al-Asghar is buried on the chest of Hussein. And the Shuhada all together, Habib ibn Mudahir to himself. This is the heritage of the family of the Prophet. 50 years after Rasulullah, this is what happens with them. Imam Zainul Abidin is back in Kufa. Lady Zainab says, where were you? He said, I had to complete the deed Allah and me can only fulfill. When they returned back to Medina, they got to the city of Medina. Before they were approaching Medina, they asked Yazid, let us go to Medina, but via detour to Karbala, we need to bury those heads that remained unburied. When Imam Zainul Abidin and the family of Abu Abdullah got to Karbala, they saw that someone had beat them to Karbala before them. This man was the elderly companion of the Prophet. Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari says to his servant, says to him that we need to make sure that Abu Abdullah we can visit and that the men are not there to harm us. So if you see anyone coming, tell me, so we need to leave, because I cannot see, he was blind. Then he goes to the grave of Imam al-Hussein. He says, I don't know where his grave is, but I ask you, I tell you, Atiyah, oh my servant, I can smell the smell of Jannah from that direction. He goes to the grave. It was the grave of the Imam. He threw himself on the grave of Abu Abdullah and he called out 3 times, Habibi, Hussein, Nur Aini, Ya Hussein. He began to cry over the body, the grave that covered the body of Imam al-Hussein. Atiyah al-Awfi says to Jabir, Ya Jabir, I see people coming. He says, then be careful. What if it's the men of Ibn Ziyad? He says, I will look. Atiyah goes. He comes back to Jabir. He says, Ya Jabir, stand up and welcome Imam Zainul Abidin. Jabir stands hands. Imam Zainul Abidin comes to Jabir. They begin to hug and embrace each other, crying right over the grave of Imam al-Hussein. Jabir says to Imam Zainul Abidin, Ya Ali ibn al-Hussein, tell me what happened in Karbala. Imam Zainul Abidin begins to say, Ya Jabir, huna qutila Abu Abdullah. Jabir, here Abu Abdullah was killed. Ya Jabir, huna subiyat nisa'una. Here our women were taken captive. And he's pointing where and where. Wa ya Jabir, huna qutila akhi al-radi'. Here my young brother Abdullah was slaughtered. And right by the Furat, Abul Fadl lay there. Over there, the back of Hussein was killed and smashed. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. فرج عنا يا Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you on behalf of the one slain in Karbala to heal all those who are sick. Ya Allah, we have many marda, many brothers and sisters around the world from the lovers of Ahlul-bayt who are not well, who are not feeling well. Brothers and sisters, if there's a time to make dua, it's the time right near the 10th of Muharram. We ask you, Ya Allah, on behalf of the one ill in Karbala, Zainul Abidin, Shafi Mardana, اقضي حوائجنا فرج عنا اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج اللهم إنا نسألك أن لا تبعد بيننا وبين الحسين طرفة عين أبدا. Ya Allah, we ask you to not separate from us and the love of Imam al-Hussein for one moment, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you to grant us the ziyarah of Abi Abdullah in this dunya and to grant us his shafa'ah in the akhirah. Oh Allah, we ask you to grant us the ziyarah of Mawlana Abul Fadl al-Abbas, Ya Allah, and the ziyarah of Lady Zainab al-Kubra, and the Imams buried in al-Baqi'. Ya Allah, Imam Zainul Abidin, Imam al-Mujtaba, Imam al-Baqir, and al-Sadiq, those lonely graves in al-Baqi'. Grant us their ziyarah, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you to allow us to honor Sayyidu Shuhada every Muharram and every year, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you to allow us to have and build and project the message of Ahlul-bayt in the West, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you to allow us for every project, for every endeavor, for everything we do, for the sake of Ahlul-bayt, allow it to be smooth and easy and for your ridah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, brothers and sisters, I understand there are many efforts here. We have, insha'Allah, Allah willing, the new project that we are having. This will aid and serve the youth of our community. This will cater to them and their needs. The future generation, brothers and sisters, make the dua that today, insha'Allah, these efforts are fulfilled if it is with the ridha of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, oh Allah, we ask you for the shuhada, the ulama, and for all those who asked us for dua, let us recite the ayat 5 times. Amma yujibul muftar, for all those who are ill, brothers and sisters, all together. Amma yujibul ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه أمن يجيب. Raise the hands. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم اكشف السوء والبلاء عنا يا Allah. Oh Allah, we have many of those who are ill. May Allah bless and prolong the lives of all of our community members here. May Allah rest the soul of our brother who was taken soon, a few months ago, right here by the masjid. Ya Allah, arhamhu bi rahmatika al-wasi'ah. Ya Allah, we ask you, we have our dear brother. May Allah bless you, brother Samir. His father was not feeling too well earlier. Brothers and sisters, make dua for his sake and all the mu'mineen to heal them with the quickest of healing. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, for all the mu'mineen gathered here, for the sisters and the mothers and all those who worked. Ya Allah, grant them their hajat. Ya Allah, for those who came and served in this majlis. Ya Allah, those who flew, may Allah bless our brother Imran. coming all this way, reading the masab of Ahlul-bayt. For his sake, Ya Allah, bless him برحمتك الواسعة, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, bless our workers and our helpers, the security that helped us, those who were responsible opening and closing, those who contributed in any way, and those who were the recipients of the majalis. Oh Allah, bless us all بزيارة أبي عبد الله يا الله إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والعلماء والشهداء سيما من أوصانا بالدعاء رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.